Thank you very much for coming along. Today's pretty interesting. It'll be more interesting if I can get those slides working, but it's exciting. So today we're going to focus on two fundamental things, okay? We're going to focus on contractor management and when you can carve out and when you can't carve out for a contractor. The second thing, and the majority of what we're going to be doing, is doing psychological hazards. But before we start, I just need to say a couple of things to the Kingston team for being the best actors. So just go Kingston, well done. We are looking for volunteers from another council for the next one, so you can just think about that after you see the accolades. The report on Kingston, please jump in. I'd also like to thank our marketing team, which is Nikki, Sophie, Toy, Freya, because this is an amazingly complex event to put on. At the end of today, we'll be able to send, not today, but in the next few days, we'll send you out like a movie of everything that's here, but what was said by the experts as well. Does that make sense? So you'll actually have a training video you can take back and utilise. So that's, I think, a pretty exciting thing. And to all of you for coming along, that's just fantastic. I hope the food's good. Now, I want to introduce you very quickly. Arthur, probably the leading psychological hazards expert in psychological circles in Australia, so he's going to talk to you briefly. Tim's a clinical psychologist we use diagnostically and to get in and help people, not just the person who's been harmed, but the organisation that fixed stuff. Remarkable guy, also on the panel for WorkSafe, so there's a whole lot of other utilisation that Kim has for Tim. Matt, I think most of you know him in safety, probably in the council area, the best safety practitioner I've got, and Nina, of course, who heads up our safety group internally. So they're our experts for today. What I'm going to do now is just talk through very quickly a few things, then hand over to Arthur. We're going to do 3 scenarios today, 3 case studies. For 2 of them, you're going to work out the answer. You're going to identify the hazards, you're going to determine what the risk is, you're going to tell me what the control should be, okay? And there's great stuff in front of you. And you'll see this, which has been prepared by Matt and Arthur, which are the how-to-do guides, okay, with a bit of other information. Now for me, in very simple terms, this is what we're going to do today, okay, and I've explained that already. We're going to know exactly what is a contractor and when are they responsible. What I want to talk to you about very quickly is, when we talk about psychological hazards, and Arthur will drill down on this, there are 3 buckets, 2 are lawful, 1 is unlawful. First bucket is prevention, which is systems, skills, talent to prevent hazards from arising, okay? The second one is intervention. When a hazard does arise, what is the intervention you're going to do to prevent it being harmful? That complies with the law, both of those. They both meet section 21 and 22, and for officers in the room, section 144 of our safety legislation, okay? But the third one is unlawful, and that is once the harm is done. It is both compensable and a breach of safety law. So have a look, see how you go as we go through. Here's my 3 buckets, you won't forget them. You'll find that I occasionally take away Arthur's word support and change it to destruction because they get a bit catastrophic at times. Arthur's a much more generous soul than I am. What I'm trying to say, by the time you get to bucket 3, you damage somebody. The cost to any one of your organisations of getting a psychological hazard where someone doesn't come back to work is somewhere between $300,000 to $1 million. So understand, just teaching leadership and skills to prevent it doesn't take much, but it's big savings, isn't it? Okay, contractors. I engage a contractor. Do they have the skill, the capacity, the systems to meet the hazards that they will encounter or produce as a result of their work? If they have that in the supervision, you can carve out liability because they can do everything that is reasonably practical to provide a safe workplace. That is, they can identify a hazard, they can determine the level of risk, institute controls, okay? But it is an ambulatory obligation. In other words, if the supervisor doesn't come in 3 out of the 5 days, the responsibility falls back to you. Is that clear? So a contractor that has 2 people can be somebody you can carve out to. It's unlikely, but they can. Remember, all of you have an obligation to try and contract within your own territory, which means you're inclined to get people of lower skills around safety. So I just put it out there. A psychological hazard is any psychological thing that harms someone psychologically. Internal, external, what they bring to work, it doesn't matter. On 1 December, good luck for what's going to happen, because we still don't know. The Victorian government seems to have dropped prevention plans, but I don't know if that's true. We'll wait and see, okay? And I guess the other thing to remember is hazards are not deliberate. They're part of our DNA. For people who work with me are aware that I create plenty of hazards. Whether I'm self-aware enough to prevent those, I'm not sure. But they're not deliberate things. On your table, you have the guide. Arthur will talk about those. I need you to work collaboratively when we do the case studies. And most of all, have a bit of fun. If I don't hear laughter, I know we're failing. All right, I'm going to hand over to Arthur now. Arthur, here.
It's really about setting everyone up for success today in the workshop, and thank you for having me as well. So really what we're looking to do is take an integrated approach to psychological health and safety. Often in this space, A doesn't equal B, and there's multiple levers we need to be pulling, and it's how do we think a bit more systemically in how we approach psychological health and safety in the workplace. Andrew's shared the buckets. I tend to take a bit more of a strengths-based approach in all of this. So how do we look at those three buckets through preventing harm? And that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we move upstream? We've spent a long time downstream. Something happens and we get people help and support. What are those things we need to be doing upstream in the preventative space to support our people? Number one. Two, how do we protect our people? As well, what are the things we need to be putting around to wrap around that? And how do we support their recovery if they are impacted? So we're going to look at it very much through a systemic lens, and that's why we talk about psychological health and safety broadly. So it encapsulates all those things Andrew was just talking to as well. So those factors, those structures, the systems, the skills, all of those things that become critical. Just sharing this slide here, we know why this is important. We know the prevalence of mental health in the community. 1 in 5 people who experience a mental health condition. 9 people die by suicide every single day. 1 in 3 people report feeling lonely, and one of the biggest contributors to poor mental health is loneliness, isolation, withdrawal. So how can we play a part to support the broader community? But if we take this to the workplace context, and we know some of the publications through SafeWork Australia, more recently, over the last 12 months, psychological injury claims are likely to double by the year 2030. WorkSafe Victoria published psychological injury claims making up 15% of the total claims, up from 9% about 4 years ago, and they're expected to rise to about 33% by the year 2030. Andrew's just shared the costs. If I get to some of the costs, I'd like to move to the humanistic side of all of this. Average psychological claim costs 4 times more than a physical injury, and 4 times longer to get somebody back to work. And the probability of a return when it exceeds 9 weeks plus reduces significantly. So we've got an important role to play here, and that's why I talk about prevention, because that's not where we want to end up. That's the bucket, which becomes really tough and challenging, and thinking about your own roles and what you do in this space becomes quite tricky and challenging. And economically, poor mental health in workplaces impacts on presenteeism, which contributes to about $14 billion. So how can we improve presenteeism in the workplace? What can that look like? Because we know it can make it more present. And what I mean by present, people operating at 20%, 30% presenteeism, or are they consistently impacted by a range of psychosocial risks? We know the benefits, but I'll get to, I hope we also know some of the industry-specific ones. But if we get this right, we see creativity improve, morale improve, people being more present in the workplace, less of these risk factors listed up here as well. I'm not going to get into all of these because we're going to be unpacking these today, but some of the telling data and the industry-specific ones we know are poor workplace behaviours and poor support is one big risk factor that we need to get on top of and look at how we tackle that, and we're going to explore that today. Bullying and harassment makes up about 27% of psychological injury claims. In the local government, it can get up to about 37%. And I think Andrew shared the costs. As much as we talk about 60,000 as a median, claims are getting to $250,000 right up to $1 million. And when you've got an interpersonal breakdown with a mental health condition, that's often a lot more challenging to tackle. Andrew's covered a lot of the legislative and legal obligations But I do like sharing this particular visual here, and this is the model we're going to start to adopt today, and some of you will have seen this, I would hope, in some shape or form. But what we're going to look at is how we actually assess risk and hazards, how do we assess hazards. So it's about identifying that hazard first and foremost, assessing that hazard, and we're going to do some of that today, and then implementing controls. And I'm going to support you in how we use what you've got in front of you, the 7 workplace focus areas. That can be a really helpful way to consider things more systemically as you go through this process. So what does that actually look like? We know there's a bunch of hazards. We've got the codes of practice, we've got changes coming in back end of this year, but the reality is the hazards are not going to change if you look across the country. And if you go back to ISO guidelines and the likes, they're all the same. So we shouldn't be waiting until December for WorkSafe to share with us what the hazards are, because we know what they are. There might be some obligations that might look a bit different compared to other states. But ultimately, we understand these hazards are shared, the industry ones. And where I want to move to is the how. So the hazards are the what. How do we actually navigate this? And we're going to work through a model known as the 7 workplace focus areas for creating a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. So we've got the prevention buckets, what sits in that, which is the green up the top there, and the blue. So we've got leadership, culture, work design. That's where we need to move to. And we're seeing a lot of guidelines, even through Safe Work, around targeting work design. So we're going to spend some time unpacking that today. We're going to spend more time in the green and blue up the top there, because that's where your biggest impact is. Even if you don't do anything else, if you get leadership right, culture right, design right, things tend to play out a lot better. Then we've got the protective factors, clearly there. We've got coping and resiliency, and what do I mean by that? What evidence-based training are we putting in place to target those risk factors? Not just general resiliency. So if there's occupational violence, what skills are we giving our people to better manage challenging interactions? Exposure to trauma, what is that specific training? So we don't just do a blanket wellbeing program, we actually look at the industry-specific, the LG-specific risk factors. And I listed some of those up there earlier. And early intervention is in that support bucket as well. Protection, bucket, which is really about the leader's role in checking in earlier, supporting their people earlier, and putting good structure around how they lead with compassion and care and have those one-on-ones. What does that actually look like? We'll spend some time looking at that, and then you've got support, recovery, and awareness. So this is what the bucket can look like. I'm just going to step through really quickly because it'll help you once you get into your case studies. What I do is pull out a risk factor. Let's say inappropriate workplace behaviours, that's a common one. We know that, that's a local gov risk factor. Then what I want to do is map it to these 7 workplace focus areas when I'm designing a control. So rather than saying, let's roll out respect at work training, and that's it, that's where we stop. We haven't quite tackled everything. So what you want to do is go inappropriate workplace behaviours, what do we need to do at leadership level? Inappropriate work behaviours, what do we need to do at a cultural level? What does that need to look like? Are we creating psychologically safe environments? Are we creating good policies around that? Then we move to work design. Are there any work design challenges that are contributing to poor behaviours? Not enough tools, resources, just the way the work is designed can exacerbate behaviours. So how are we mitigating some of these things? Then we move into resiliency and coping. Are we educating people on what is appropriate workplace behaviours, how we manage this, what we need to do, how I get support, what does that look like? And then we move into the support recovery space around inappropriate workplace behaviours. What are we putting in place when people are impacted? Is there good organisational justice in how we're navigating that? Support mechanisms for all of that. And then how we're building awareness around inappropriate workplace behaviours or appropriate workplace behaviours. So you can see that really simplistically. We're going to unpack it in more details with the case studies, but it just helps us think about it more systemically and integrated. Because there's some things you won't have control over, but what you want to make sure is you've got a bunch of levers you can draw on, that you can pull which ultimately protects people a lot more around site health and safety. Here are just some other considerations there. This is more things, this is more about the things you can do to lead a psychologically healthy and safe work environment, and these are all the things we're going to be talking about today. How do we demonstrate leadership commitment? Leadership is key. It's 80% of success in all of this. All the research highlights it. You can have a bunch of different programs which are great, but how do we get that commitment at the top level and ownership at the top level? And we know there's personal legal accountability and responsibility around this, so we've got a great opportunity to champion that. And we'll talk today about some of the things you can do to support that journey. Clearly creating a psychologically safe environment, and what I mean by psychologically safe, a bit different to psychological health and safety, feeling safe to speak up without fear of retribution or consequence. That's the cultural bit. How do we create that? What does that actually look like? There's a bunch of things we can be doing there. Consult. You'll see that was the wraparound around that risk model. When we're identifying and assessing, we're actually consulting with our people. Let's get people to validate a lot of this and ultimately come up with the solutions. What are the things that they can come up with to help optimise a lot of this? And there's a bunch of other things we can do there. So looking forward to working with everyone today. Wanted to introduce you to the 7 workplace focus areas, because that's what we're going to be using for the case studies, and fielding any questions along the way. So thank you all very much.
So the good old contractor, something that you all would face day to day with, potentially contractor management, with whether they be small, medium, large contractors. And what Andrew was saying before was just around, how do you actually carve this out? Well, the key is really around, you need to contract people in because they've got the external expertise that you need to be able to do the types of work you need to do in local government. But the key thing now is, well, what are the things that you need to be asking so that you can cover out that liability? And in terms of this, it's really about this reasonable practicability test. And I'll take you through the steps in 2 seconds, but you need to be able to demonstrate that you've done the work to make sure that you're satisfied that that person that you're going to contract in, whether they're, a 2-man band, whether they're a larger organisation, and the type of work they're actually doing, do they have those skills? Do they have the systems? And it's not just about a screen dump. It's not just about throwing all the documentation to you. It's making sure that they know how to apply that documentation, because a lot of them will go and buy it off the shelf. They'll contact safety professionals to get the safe work method statements written, and they're 28-page documents, and look, that's great, but that doesn't actually tell you from a sequential order about exactly what it is that they're going to do and what the steps that they're going to take to manage the risk that you've engaged them to, or for the work that you've engaged them to undertake. So the key things are really that the verification steps, this is your pre-qualification. So regardless of the type of work that you're contracting them in to do, you need to follow these steps. So whether that's a contractor verification check process, whatever it might be, you need to know that they've got the qualifications that are there, and that they can produce those qualifications, and those qualifications are current. You need to know that they've got the systems. So the systems mean that, they have got the policy documents, they have got, the hazard management systems in place. A lot of them will send you in that they've got ISO certification, but what does that actually really mean, It doesn't mean anything unless it's being applied. And the main thing that you want to see is that they've got a process for applying this stuff out in the field. In terms of making sure that they're putting this stuff in play. So this really comes down to their operational instructions. So as I said, the Safe Work Method Statement, it's the bane of my existence, really. It's used for the 19 high-risk construction work tasks. It can be used outside of that. The most important thing you want to see is that it's sequential. What do they do when they first get there? So they do a site inspection. Okay, now they're setting up. Have they done your dials? Have they located services? What about if there's overhead lines or anything like that there. You know, that they've got this, so if you arrive at site to do a periodic check, that you know exactly where they are in that process and that they're following this stuff. And it makes it a lot easier for you to know that you can carve out that liability to them because they actually know what they're doing and they know how to actually apply this stuff, not actually just ticking the box or sending stuff in and saying, okay, here's the safety stuff, off you go and run. And then the instruction. I think it's really important also to let the contractor know what their responsibilities are as well, because at the end of the day, you're engaging them. You know, you're paying their bill. So as such, they need to understand what they're accountable for. And that if you do arrive there to do a periodic check and you identify that they're not actually following the systems, they haven't got a spotter in place, they haven't got traffic management systems in place, well, that should be some sort of, you know, a non-conformance or some sort of notice that you're issuing them. You're not telling them how to do it. You're just saying to them, okay, we've identified this. You need to tell us how you're going to fix this before you start again. Because often they just don't want to do that. And that's where you get this argy-bargy that starts to occur because the line in the sand has been placed at the start when you're doing the engagement and thereafter. At the end of the day, you've got that responsibility. So when you do the periodic checks, that's what you're really looking for, is how they're actually managing operational risk. So the main thing there is around what I've seen definitely in local government sometimes is that level of trust that, you know, they know what they're doing. We've engaged them for so many years, and so therefore, you know, we'll continue to use them, and there's not that due diligence that's undertaken to make sure that they are actually good at what they're doing and they are actually good at managing operational risk. So you need to take those reasonable steps to satisfy yourself at the front end, at the engagement level, because then you can carve out, because if you can't, well then now you're caught, you know, in the potential requirement to do this supervision and oversight, and now you're getting caught more and more and more in relation to the potential liability risks should something go wrong. Okay. So that's what we'll be looking at in terms of this process. So yeah, that's me.
Good morning everyone, my name is Tim Boyle, I'm a clinical psychologist, and thanks for the introduction. So, much like so many of you who are here from injury management perspective, I only end up seeing people when either someone is incredibly vulnerable or in fact a psychological injury has already occurred. So I see people for fitness for duty assessments, IMEs. I see people in the early intervention phase. I see people in the referred to private and therapy. And as a clinicite, and for those individuals referred to their GPs, referred to physio, our focus ends up being solely on the individual. And I was talking about strengths. We don't get that luxury. When the injuries occur, all our focus is on vulnerability. All our focus is on vulnerability. And the great weakness of that approach is that nothing's happened in a vacuum. The injured person has become injured, not like on their own in the dark somewhere. Something's happened. And even, it's only for the most kind of egregious cases where everything has been fabricated. And that almost never happens. It's such a tiny percentage. The person has become injured in a context or in a place. And yes, they bring vulnerabilities. That's my job to try to understand and identify and work. But this has all happened somewhere. And understanding the somewhere allows you an enormous opportunity. In the physical space, we don't think about this so much anymore. In the physical space, we know that if we look at the workplace and our practices and our risks, that injury rates drop, that fatality rates drop. We don't think about it anymore. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, etc., when someone was injured at work or when someone died at work, the initial starting point was, well, what did they get wrong? They stuffed up. We don't think that way anymore, and life is at them so better. The same move is now happening around psychological injury. And so, while so much of my focus ends up being on building, workplaces can focus on where hazards of risk are, as Arthur's already talked about. And there is enormous benefit from doing it. From my perspective, if you can figure out what's going on in the workplace, then return to work becomes so much easier and so much more successful. Well, Andrew does talk about this destruction. There's an enormous amount of good that can be done in those phases, but if you don't address work, I can guarantee you that nothing I do makes a damn little difference. It just does. In terms of return to work, it just doesn't. It just doesn't. But a combination of things can work and can work really successfully. So I guess what I'd like to encourage more than anything else is that there's a lot you can do, and a lot you can do that's little and what works really, really well in these sorts of instances in cases when an individual has been injured. And while there are circumstances or the issues like, as Arthur's mentioned, that become crucial involvement of leadership, sometimes capacity to influence leadership is limited. But if you can figure out issues around hazards and figure out how to understand both the vulnerabilities of the worker and what the workplace might have added to the circumstance and alter the workplace issue around hazard and around risk, an enormous amount of good can occur. It really can. And I guess that's kind of the point of the workshop today. Other things that are more complex, how to understand individual vulnerability, how to understand return to work, and how to understand performance management all at once. We can't get into that in a workshop like today. We just don't have the time. Complexities beyond the capacity for half that workshop in even longer. But can you address and understand hazards and still work with people's individual vulnerabilities successfully? Yeah, you can. And that's what we'll explore today. Thank you.
We spoke about before, and I just want to remind you, by the time someone gets in the workers' compensation system, they're harmed. But the workers' compensation system makes sure they're harmed more, because actually to be compensated, they must continue to be harmed. So remember, when we get to TIM and we're getting a diagnostic assessment of someone, we're in a process of harm. Our job is to prevent that harm. So remember, the system of workers' compensation is a living system of psychological hazard that creates harm. Our job is to prevent it from happening. Does that make sense? And that's what these case studies are about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take a seat over in different tables, we'll go. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a short video of the experts. Okay? Why am I doing it? One, because they get a chance to expand on things a little bit more. But secondly, this is a take home. At the end of this will become part of your movie you take with you. And what we're doing here, you can see broken up in detail with me doing the interview. It's just these things that are here.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so Pro, over to you.
G'day Arthur, how are you?
Good.
Well, here we are. We've got nearly 100 people from local government, and I thought I'd have a chat to you just before we start the scenarios. Arthur, so many people struggle to identify what are psychological hazards in their work environment. They're good to people, they're kind to people. How do people identify when things are a hazard, and then they can do the analysis, but how do they identify the outlier, that there's something wrong and they've got to act?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in it, starting with the individual first and the principle of creating a culture or thinking about yourself through the lens of care and compassion. And within that sits accountability, because if we lead with care and compassion, we're recognising hazards. A leader that cares, sees. A leader that sees and cares, responds. And fundamentally, compassion is about responding. It's a demonstration of behaviour.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because too often people get caught up in the world of empathy and don't understand actually we're human beings.
Yeah.
I need to know that you care about me. I don't need you to know that you feel my pain. I need you to actually show that you care. And part of showing you caring is saying when something is wrong, it needs to stop, and to providing a way around it.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I think that's great. I think one of the things that interests me is, okay, you've come to an organisation, you want to build this capacity inside the organisation to do it. What's the first thing you need to do? It's around leadership, isn't it?
Fundamentally, it is. Leadership, and all the research highlights this, fundamentally leadership is going to have the biggest impact, even if we don't do anything else. If we can get leadership right, and I spoke about that principle of leading with care and compassion, that creates the culture shift, and fundamentally a leader is the one in control of responding.
That's right. They have the accountability. It's the operational people. But my mother would have said reflection, because I clearly didn't have a lot of it. But she said the art of being an adult is learning to reflect rather than talk.
Yeah.
And that's part of what leaders need to learn, isn't it? They need to reflect and organise themselves, understand the pressures they have on, but ensure what's happening beneath them is doable and it fits within the skills and capacity of the person. All right. That's enough about me. What about you? Yeah, I'm coming to an organisation. They've said, Arthur, you've been doing this for 20 years. You're the leading expert in it. I can't afford you quite now. What could I do? What's the database that I could go out and look and say, where are the risks that I have in my business?
Yeah, well, let's speak about that care and compassion piece. So one thing I'd be looking at first and foremost, are there good embedded values and behaviours within the organisation? So am I able to assess that in some shape or form? Are there other metrics that might exist within the workplace? That could be an engagement survey, that could be employee assistance program data, that could be exit interview data, equally performance management data as well within that. There's a wealth of data points that we can just draw on that exist within
and
the
they're
organisation.
objective. They're sitting there just waiting to be harvested,
That's right.
aren't they? The irony for me, after my years, and I'm older than you, Arthur, is that people know where the problem is too. So often when you do all this, they go, yeah, we know it's in that area. So when we're developing this first heat map that says, look, in your organisation you have a number of hazards that appear in a number of parts. Often the leaders already know where that is, but nothing's happened. So the data is a driver, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gives you the facts in a governance space that says, well, now you can't hide from it. So go to the data.
That's right.
Yeah. Managing psychological hazards is an expensive process. Do you have to spend a whole lot of money to build a capacity?
Yeah, and that's instinctively we think it's costly. But there's a big human element to all of this, and I think I touched on it. If we can get some of the fundamentals right, which is about good leadership, mindset, good values, behaviours within the organisation, we're well and truly on that journey of tackling hazards. Then it's a matter of looking at, inherent risk factors in certain hotspots and being quite targeted in the way you tackle that risk. So that broad view on let's just roll out a whole bunch of wellbeing solutions.
It's nonsense, isn't it?
That's right. That doesn't mean it's going to tackle occupational violence.
Yeah, fruit bowls don't stop bullying. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way, does it?
That's right. If we've got occupational violence in a particular area, if we're talking about local government, library staff, often interacting with members of the community, saying let's run a wellbeing program isn't necessarily going to tackle the need in that area, but maybe how to have challenging interactions and conversations might support that.
Yeah.
So being really focused.
I think, can I say and these aren't hard things either. The library staff is a great example of people coming off the street. You're providing a community service to people, so all sorts of people come off. But when you're allowed to say, no, I'm going to disengage and walk away, what are the very simple rules that make your environment safe?
That's right.
But it's only analysis that drives you to that place, because people, particularly in local government, will always focus on the needs of other people rather than the needs of themselves. And I guess that comes to the last part of, we've talked about what you got to look, how you look for them, what are the skills you need, what is the data, but what is a good culture?
Yeah. Look, and I think it goes back to that first principle that I shared. A good culture of care and compassion allows you to create a psychologically safe culture, a culture where people feel safe to speak up, share concerns, challenges, risks without fear of retribution or consequence. So it's about creating first and foremost that culture, and then through that, the accountability side, which is the action, taking action off the back of that.
That's great. Now, we're about to watch these three scenarios. Can you put your feet in the shoes of the people who are out there in our audience with us? What do you want them to do today as these scenarios come up?
Yeah. I know I keep harping on this care and compassion, but start the case studies with your mindset of care and compassion. So you're reading these case studies and you care about the individuals or the situation that's playing out in that case study. With that, that'll help you start to recognise potentially some of the risks that could be impacting.
And Tim will talk about this more, but one of the problems with psychological hazards is we're inclined to concentrate on healing the victim without understanding the causation.
Yeah.
And the causation can be internal, it can be external, there can be a whole number of factors and a whole number of people. But it's not about just the injured person. Obviously, we've got to look after them. It is, when you look at this, look more broadly. What are the factors that are coming to play?
And some of those things, to further advance that would be looking at things like, what's the cultural environment like? What are the potential work design factors that could be contributing within that case scenario, right through to, is there any kind of capability missing, coping, resiliency skill set that might be required in that role, or early intervention within that could have been thought about beforehand to mitigate a lot of this.
Arthur, that's great. Now, over to you guys. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, 20th of August, we're here, 100 people from local government, and what we need to talk about is contractor management, your expertise. Now, Matt, you work in lots of councils with all different size of contractors. When can a council go, it's not my problem, it's theirs? When can they carve out responsibility and say, no, I'm not responsible for this, the contractor is responsible for safety? When does that occur?
It really depends on the size of the contractor, the type of work that they will be undertaking, the skills and competencies of the contractor, and I guess the type of systems that they've got, so that the council can satisfy themselves that contractor has actually got some reasonable systems in place.
Yeah.
The smaller ones, they're the ones that you need to be worrying about as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because the law is simple, and that is you can't carve out safety liability unless you can demonstrate the organisation who's doing it can do everything that is reasonably practical, which is to identify hazards, determine risk, institute controls to provide a safe workplace, safe system of work, safe induction for people coming under work, safe supervision. If they can't do that, then they're yours as a council. But it's harder in council because the higher local is a big thing, and there's lots of smaller family-based businesses who can be very competent doing a bit of curb and channeling. So they do understand the safety. They have got the systems. So size can be deceptive, can't it? It really comes down to the competence of the practitioners who are there doing the work.
That's correct, yeah.
And that happens by not just doing a paper check and, tick and flick. Oh, they've got a system, they've got this. You've got to actually interview them and know their competence, don't you?
You've really got to look at what sort of, licenses they've got and are they actually current. Sometimes their licenses expire and they haven't updated them. Their risk-based documentation, does it actually reflect what they're going to be doing, or is it war and peace that they've got off the shelf from someone? I
know, and the classic example is with pre-qualifications. You'll hire someone to dig a small hole, and they're absolutely great. They do it on time. They're great at doing it. And you think, God, right time, right price. Let's give them a bigger job. And the pre-qualification follows them, but they're not competent to do that at all.
And that's right. I think that how they actually understand what level of risk there is and the level of, pre-work they need to do to understand what sort of steps they need to take is really vital for them.
I've got to say to you, you've got the bylaws inspector sitting next to you. Okay, go get out of it. All right, the other thing we're going to talk about is psychological hazards. And one of the things about assessing risk for psychological hazards is it's a lot different than physical environmental hazards, isn't it? Do you want to talk about that just a little bit, Matt?
Well, the psychological one is where it's there's a number of different things to be looking for is, like what their systems are around bullying and harassment, also just around, the demands of the work they're undertaking, what sort of control they're going to have over the work that they're going to be undertaking. It's a lot harder to be able to examine what systems they've got versus a risk assessment for digging of a trench where they've got to have dial before you dig, they've got to have, the services being checked, then they can have all the systems around excavation. A lot of people don't really understand the nature of psychological risk and I guess the impact that can have on people over time.
I think one of the things that always strikes me is that there's a couple of things, and that is, unlike a physical hazard, psychological hazards hurt every time. You might have a very tough skin, you might be a very resilient creature, but the aggregational nature, they keep doing of things that are wrong, gradually erodes and harms people. And the problem with that is the gradual erosion of someone's mental health means once they do break, they don't come back. So that's one thing. And the second thing is it must be relationship-based, the management process, because otherwise you don't know what the external risk, what happened at that person's home before they turned to work. And it's that eggshell skull thing. The moment Matt walks through the door, Matt's an employee. It doesn't matter whether Matt's a strong, robust guy or whether he's very vulnerable. Who he is, the risk he presents externally now becomes an internal risk. And I think that's the other part that's often missed, isn't it?
And as you said, you don't know what people are carrying around with them, what sort of other sort of things have happened in their life. And, if someone's being bullied or harassed from, another member of, that staff, or even from members of the public, or if there's, any sort of intimidatory behaviour from, members of the public, those sort of things, they do build up, and often people are reluctant to report. And so therefore they just don't, they carry that themselves. And how does it manifest? That's the reason why once it does manifest, that people do, they go off work, they never come back.
Yeah. It's off. And look, the last thing is today we're going to put up 3 scenarios and you've got a risk assessment and control tool out there. What's your tip for people who are sitting there ready to do the scenarios, and what should they be looking for in these case studies?
Keep it simple. Like the problem with safety is that it's gone full circle. It started off simple and then it's become more complicated than it needed to be. And it's now a matter of coming back to the start again and just looking at if it's a contractor, what is the actual work they're actually doing? What is the sequencing of the work that they're going to actually undertake? What are the hazards and how they're going to control it? And it can be handwritten. It doesn't need to be 28 pages in War and Peace. It can be as simple as possible. And that's what the regulator wants to see. They want to see that it's dirty, it's been used, it's been, folded and scrunched up, and that says that it's actually being used. So keep it simple. Understand, again, what work are they actually doing? What is the risk attached? And does the level of control give you comfort to know that they actually do know what they're doing and how they're going to apply those controls?
Thanks, Matt.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Tim Doyle. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm here in part to play the role of a GP later on. But I also wanted to speak about the issues of psychological injury in a workplace. Very often when someone is sent to a clinical psychologist because of psychological injury in the workplace, we end up spending all of our time focusing on an individual, their illness, their symptoms, and their problems. The difficulty that this creates is that implicitly it is as if the person is responsible. They have caused this injury. And so all our attention goes onto the problem, the injury, the signs, the symptoms. And this doesn't accurately understand the issue or really effectively help it from happening again, or really help the person recover. The movement now about understanding psychosocial hazards, the harm that's possible through exposure to them, is catching up, if you like, on the work that was already done in this area regarding physical hazards. Many, many years ago, it might be considered that if a worker was injured on a work site, that they were to blame. They were stupid, they were negligent, they didn't pay attention. But that attitude changed, and instead the focus was then on, what safety mechanisms were in place, what was taught to the person about keeping them safe, what preventions were already enacted by a workplace to stop these things happening. Now, when considering psychosocial hazards and psychological harm, the emphasis is again shifting and needs to shift onto what's a workplace like? What are the conditions that led to this issue? How do we understand them? How can we control them? And how can we prevent them? And in that way, we understand that an illness is not an event that has happened because of some implicit weakness or vulnerability in a person, but rather that the workplace plays a really meaningful role, both in terms of the hazards that are present, but also understanding them, trying to mitigate them or prevent them. Becoming involved as when you're providing independent psychological assessments or early intervention programs is a much more effective way of being involved with the workplace, because you can highlight both what is going to be most useful for a person when they're returning to work, and also make suggestions about what a workplace might consider in terms of alterations over time, to both encourage a worker to come back to work, but also address the kind of implicit hazards and encourage the worker to help identify with the workplace the kind of implicit hazards that have given rise to the injury in the first place. It doesn't load all the responsibility magically and inappropriately on the worker. The way, and this is represented in things like diagnostic manuals, is the way burnout is understood. Burnout is a workplace phenomenon. It is not a mental illness, and it's not considered as such. In the case studies that are coming up, I'm going to be playing the role of a GP, and GPs very often get caught in a position where all they can do is focus on the individual and on their symptoms. What that ends up doing very often is ignoring the broader causes and keeping an individual trapped with the notion of them being sick, them needing treatment, and the possibility that they never really get better.
So what we're going to do here, I think, now, is I want you to have a quick look in the last 10 minutes. There is case study 1. We're going to have morning tea. There's sausage rolls. I just don't want to cause a rush, but they're really good sausage rolls. What I'd like you to do is to read case study 1, and then we're going to have a break. Okay? So let me just explain what's going to happen now so that it makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to see the witnesses in scenario 1 give their evidence of what happens and how they feel. And then the experts are wandering around the table and they'll come and sit down with you and they'll go through what's on your table to do the risk assessment process. And then I'll get them back up here and we'll do 2 or 3 minutes just quickly on the key issues that should be identified. Remember, this is bucket 1.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
G'day, Eva. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Now, you've been working at council for about 2 to 3 years. Where did you do your Bachelor of Engineering?
Yes, I studied through Swinburne University, finished up in 2022.
Yep.
So, yeah, civil engineer.
And it was Colleen Moore who then supervised you through your professional year.
Yes, it was.
And you're still quite close to Colleen, aren't you?
Yeah, Colleen's a great supervisor.
Yeah. Now, tell me, since you've been there, you've started working with Neil, who is the boss. What's he like?
Yeah, he's actually really great. I look up to him quite a lot. I feel like I've got a lot to learn from him and he's been awesome so far.
Now, the council is under some pressures though, isn't it? There's a bit of you've heard the history of change that's occurred. What do you understand the pressures are like now?
Yeah, we're definitely feeling it. At my level, there's time pressures and money pressures and, we've got a lot of work to do and got to stick to it.
And talking about the work you do, what is the type of superintendent's work that you do at your level? Because you're the youngest of the engineers in the group, is that right?
Yes. So Neil's got me working on some of the smaller jobs with the bit smaller contractors. And my job is to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that, as per legislation and our swims are in order and all that kind of stuff when works are occurring on site.
Now, tell me what you think about contractors. You're dealing with contractors every day. Is it your understanding from Neil that they have the responsibility around safety?
Yes and no. I think there's a bit both ways, but they need to know what's required of them on site and to ensure that the site is safe. And a lot of the time they're signing on to our processes and procedures.
Yeah, good. All right, now can I take you to King Corners, which is the organisation who you engaged to do the Arthur and Hawth Street corners. There's a bigger project than they're used to doing, is that right?
Yeah, so we've had some good works with them in the past and we felt like we could bring them on to something a little bit bigger this time. But yeah, so it's a bit new for them.
Now, you had a post-tender meeting with them talking about what they had to do. What did that involve?
Yep, so we sat down, we went over the swims together. He was really happy with what we put down for them, and he was happy to sign on to that. We also had some traffic management discussions and just general site safety for the works.
All right, thank you. G'day, Colleen, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Now, Colleen, you're an engineer and you work with Eva.
Yep.
How do you know her? What role have you had in Eva's life?
I have a team of staff under me at Cranthorne Council, and Eva's one of our she is the only junior engineer in the team.
Okay. And you helped her through a professional year so that she became
Yes.
registered?
Yes, yep.
How would you describe Eva?
Eva's very ambitious. She is a bit of a go-getter. She's willing to give anything a go. She's very methodical in her work, likes to please people.
Okay. Do you feel there any vulnerability in her?
Yeah, there's a bit of vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does you fit well into the team? Do you think there's a reason that you fit so well into a team in which are all men?
Having worked for 15 years in engineering, I've kind of grown a thick skin, I guess you can say. Eva and I are the only two females in a large team of men. And I think that's part of some of that vulnerability of Eva is the fact that she's working in a very male-dominated industry. There's sometimes lack of sensitivity or empathy, if I could say. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit of a fix-it mentality, isn't it, in
Yes.
engineering? It's if there's a problem, we solve it.
Yes.
But the emotional part's not always as clear, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
With Eva, you've watched her grow, and what type of work does she get these days from being in her supervised part of it? What does she do now?
She predominantly works with small contracts, usually sort of very, mum and dad kind of companies. And she sort of manages those from start to finish.
Okay, good. Now, Neil is the boss. Can you talk to us a little bit about Neil?
Neil is very well respected across the organisation. He's a hard worker. He knows his stuff. We all try to please Neil because we really respect him. But he's under a lot of pressure. I've sort of noticed that is, increasing all the time, whether it's from councillors down, budget cuts, a whole range of different things. But there is a lot of pressure on Neil to get the job done, for him to meet his KPIs. So very time poor.
G'day, Neil. How are you?
All right, thanks.
Now, Neil, you're head of engineering at the council. Can you talk a little bit about the role and how it's changed over the years?
Yeah, it's we're under a lot of pressure, a lot of deadlines. There's budget constraints. I work with CEO and councillors. We get a lot of councillors breathing down our necks. I'm on a lot of tight deadlines, and so I feel the pressure in my job. I really do.
And you're struggling around capital maintenance, aren't you? Like just to get the normal capital, maintain roads, buildings and things. And there's lots of other projects that are being thrown at you as well.
Oh, always. It's never ending. As you can imagine, it's pothole central at times. So sometimes that's all we do. But there's a lot to deal with.
Now, Eva's your most junior engineer. Can you talk to me a little bit about Eva?
Oh, Eva's a great kid. Play bowls with her dad, actually. It's one of those things where I believe she's got it in her. I really do. I believe she's just needs to grow a bit of a spine. She'll get strong in the industry. Everyone starts out like that, and I'm just here to guide her and just put her, push her along in those scenarios and just be a cheerperson for her. Yeah.
G'day, Kurt. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay, Andrew. Yourself?
Kurt, you're the owner of a business called King Corners that does curb and channeling work. How long have you been in that business?
I've been in the business about 8 years.
Yeah. And who's in the business?
So there's myself and my wife who are directors, and I've got 3 employees as well.
Yeah, but that wasn't always the case, was it? You started off pretty small.
Yeah, we were pretty small, and we've started to grow as time's gone by.
Yeah. So 8 years ago, who was doing the curb and channeling work? Just you, I guess?
Just me, pretty much, yeah.
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 And you've always tendered for council work and you're on the qualification list for this council. What's it like working for the council? What happens when you get a tender? Put it out, what happens next? You have a conversation with someone, what occurs?
Yeah, we generally have a conversation to sort of work out what we need and then pop it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're on the list, the sort of pre-qualification list, and that was when you did tiny work, but the work you're doing now is?
Oh, it's quite large.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of bigger projects now.
You got any formal safety training?
Nothing formal.
No.
Yeah.
Tell me, for this project, which was this corner works that you were doing, you met Eva, who was the engineer from council. So for this particular project, you had a discussion with Eva, the engineer. What happened?
Yeah, I had a conversation with her to sort of work out what was required in terms of our safety requirements, and she helped me draft the swims.
And what size was the swims?
Oh, it's about 7 or 8 pages long.
Yeah, and could you read and understand what was in it?
Oh, not really, but it's just one of those things where, you know, they just have to be done. So I just sort of agreed with it and moved on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tell me, the employees you got working with you, is English a first language?
Maybe for a few, but for most, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so their chance of understanding that swims?
Look, they didn't really say anything. I think that they might struggle a little bit to understand it, but they're really good workers and they're really keen to get in and get the work done. But yeah, whether they really understand what they're sort of signing, I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name's Tim Doyle. I'm a GP and I've been seeing Eva for, most of her life really. I'm a GP to the whole family. It's been a treat to watch her grow up. She really loves this new job, but she's always been someone who gets anxious easily. She's smart, she's ambitious, did well with engineering, but with uni and with the job now, when things get difficult, she gets worried easily, stressed, has trouble sleeping, her appetite shuts off pretty quickly. We've talked through antidepressants, but she's never really seen the need and she's always recovered pretty quickly. I can't see why now it'd be any different. I'm really looking forward to seeing how she goes.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm Eva's sister. Look, it's hard when you see your sister finding a job a bit hard. But look, I think she'll be all right, but she's always been someone who, I don't know, she's always a bit out to the side. She's always been a little bit nervy compared to the rest of us. She's a geek. She's a bit straight down the line. And I don't always know that she gets the colleagues that she's working with. You know, she's mainly working with men. That shouldn't be too unfamiliar. That's kind of what doing engineering at university was like. But she just doesn't seem to understand the way that they work differently from her. And so when something starts going wrong, she seems to be someone who she takes that on herself. It's always, she thinks that she's done something wrong, that she's to blame. And then she puts extra pressure on. She wants to do a good job. I think, you know, she's fairly ambitious. She wants to succeed. She likes the people she works with. She wants to do a good job kind of for them, but I think she loads the pressure on herself as well.
So you got 15 minutes to solve the problem, okay? Go. I'm going to ask a couple of tables what they think. Let's come over here. So, what are the key hazards we've identified? Stuart? Lucky you!
Looked at a really interesting one. There's obviously the personal in terms of young worker, all male dominated, very much of a process of on the job, sort of learn, trial and error type culture, which is clearly also a hazard, potential hazard. But there'll be a lot of isolation on the job, you know, basically everyone's doing their own projects, got their own, you know, there's clearly excessive job demands. Really did seem to be a lack of all job clarity. It was very much a council, like this council doing that. Yeah, but you know, we work for a council, but we're not, you know, it's not councillors that actually drive us and tell us what we have to do. So that direction, that element was very much there. Really, actually, we sort of got a little bit deeper into the next question, but supervision. There's actually really good questions about the adequacy of the supervision, very much an old style, develop thick skin, rather than actually looking at into solutions now. But is that actually the best approach for a young person to come in? And you have a very quick discussion. You're actually giving her the highest risk with the smallest of operators. So you're taking your dollars view to say this is the biggest project. That's where a best engineer is. The most experienced, maybe it should be the other way around, or at least have some mentoring occurring into the solution.
Great. All right, well, that's good. Can I just say, Eva's clearly has neurodiversity, okay? Huge opportunity in an organisation, but very easy to harm, isn't it? So when we're dealing with governance on our next one, I'm going to have a person come along and speak deliberately to about managing neurodiversity in workplaces, because I think it's something that's not understood, and we deal with people who are neurally diverse as the people who are harmed and disciplined, rather than the opportunity that they bring to the organisation. So
every engineer I've worked with would be described.
I was trying to avoid you saying that, so if you could just hold that back, but maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Okay, over here we've got some controls. Who's going to tell me the controls? Silence.
Oh, sorry.
Here you go. Hello. Couldn't come better from Eva herself, could it?
So I've just written a couple down here around leadership. So creating more understanding environment of what Eva might be going through. She's still new. She needs to build up her resilience. Management there had talked about the fact that she was new and she hadn't the experience and like the spine, they said, that you get over time working in the industry. So a bit more understanding of that. Culture, setting a zero tolerance for bullying and harassment, especially from contractors on site. We're all there to do a job and do it safely. So making sure that that comes through, creating a psychological safe environment where she feels she can speak up about things or approach her management for help. And smarter work design, things like supervision. She's still new and yeah, it's a lot to learn in your first couple of years working with contractors.
All right, well let's go to Arthur and hear what Arthur's got to say. I thought I'd just throw him in the deep end. Without any warning. Arthur, off you go.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of the things have been covered, so just giving a bit of that structure. It's helping move through those 7 focus areas and think about leadership, which most of you have captured. We know that's going to have the biggest impact, so how do we tackle some of that? I love the cultural piece, so how do you create that as a leader day to day, clearly at an org level, creating that safe space to be able to speak up. We're going to be able to approach a supervisor and be vulnerable in that space around some of those challenges, and some attempts have been made to that, but then the leadership connection in recognising that and supporting that and supporting her in the best possible way. And the work design captures quite a bit. I think Matt can tackle some of those more technical aspects around that, but one through supervision, I think as you've shared, but what are the other things that could be put in place too that are outliers that could be contributing more broadly. And then I think what we could be looking at is around building the capability and skill. You've got contractors, different people engaging in different ways, different pressures, so how we're giving our people the right tools and skills to be able to navigate that, but be supported around that. Where it can really fall over is when we're giving our people the skills to have those interactions and manage those, but leadership isn't supporting it. So the after support.
Arthur, can you Stuart raised a really good question, so I'll speak loudly. I hope you can. Raised a really good question that's commonly, it's the longest person on the pecking order that is confronted by the highest level risk and is left to do, whether it's a person working at reception, whether it's somebody working in town planning. Often it's the most junior person who's confronted with the most difficult. As far as planning goes and development around that, how do you build a culture to make sure that that's safe? What are the steps you've got to do?
Yeah, I think the important aspect to this is building, and not only engineering this, but a good capability framework even at that level. So if you've got any junior person starting, what are the inherent requirements of the role? And then how do we build good skill and capability? So if they're frontline, if they're experiencing challenging interactions, vicarious trauma, all those various risks, how are we giving them the right tools, soft skills around some of these. Then you've got the technical components that sit around that. But then there's also the expectations of leadership wrapped around that. What do we expect of leadership around that? You can see here, well, just have a bit of thick skin or whatever it may be, how we shift that cultural mindset that we're supporting our frontline people in a more helpful way.
And one of the things you might think about is, well, what's wrong with using a buddy system? When you're taking someone new or young out into high-risk areas, good they see the high-risk area, but better they have a buddy who's actually managing it so they can pick up the skills, they know where the lines are, so the culture lives. I think that's important. Matt, are they a contractor that you carved out to, or are they not?
You certainly haven't carved out. So the responsibility is there, and I think again it comes back to that design of the contractor management system, because again it seems very unclear about what the contractor's roles and responsibilities are, and so as a consequence Eva's getting caught in that closer oversight and supervision of the contractor, but then also having to provide them with, you know, I guess advice that they don't want to hear, and that's hard for a junior person because that's where the senior buddy really should be there to provide that guidance and support. So it just doesn't seem to be that structure of the contractor management system for that contractor.
And the truth is, Matt, it isn't a contractor at law. They're actually yours. So you're going to be there all the time. You actually have the superintendents, okay? So that's why we put the problem up, is to show you that just because they're a contractor, safety law doesn't recognise contracts. It recognises safety law. So if they aren't able to do everything that's reasonably practical, they're yours, okay? So let's pop over to Tim, who's hiding over the wall there. I usually see Tim wandering around. Tim, at this stage, anything you need to do, or are you just not the doctor, you are actually the psychologist now, okay?
Oh, not particularly. I think it's really easy to see the vulnerabilities part, right? It's so easy to default to, well, not quite what's wrong with it, but what could be wrong. It's really easy to see those bits, and it takes a little bit more. It takes you to have to kind of stop and sit on your hands for a moment to go, hang on, in what circumstances at work could this be a concern, and what's work putting into this that makes this worse, and what could a workplace do to make it better? And so many things that came off the discussion at the table was how many little things could make such an enormous difference so quickly. And my own just reflection is the issues of bias. I remember starting on a psychiatric team with my first job after I qualified down at an early psychosis team in Frankston, and the way you cut your teeth and you gain respect was being out on your own, in a car, no duress alarm, the phone may or may not work, dealing with young people who are acutely psychotic and families who are often strongly opposed to psychiatric involvement of any sort. And your job was to go and figure it out. And from a safety perspective, it's an absolute nightmare, but the way you got respect was growing a spine and dealing with it yourself. And in retrospect, what a disaster that was.
I think in mafia lingo that's called making your bones, isn't it? Yeah. You go through that.
Pretty much.
Now, where's my boss? Where's Nina?
In here.
Oh, you're right. I could feel the aura.
So from my perspective, an employment law and safety perspective, I think there are a couple of red flags from just the start of the scenario. So our table, we talked about how everyone talked about it being a male-dominated workforce, but from the perspective that that's the status quo, it's what's to be expected. But under Section 22 of the OHS Act, you have that obligation to monitor. So it can't just be, look, she's female, there's male around, that's just how it is. You've got to be monitoring, checking in with her. Does she feel comfortable? Does she feel safe? Does she feel respected? If not, there's got to be controls put in place. And also with Neil, there is psychosocial hazards that are affecting him. So I'm sure all of you would have had pressure come down from external stakeholders. Councils in particular can have one view of when things should be done, which doesn't always align with what council resources permit. So it needs to be looking at his work design and considering, well, does he have the right supports, but also monitoring and ensuring that he's not pushing that psychological pressure down to Eva as well as a coping mechanism, because that's just causing more problems. And to what Matt was saying about the contractor management, one of the biggest issues we see when we get safety prosecutions is, oh, someone's already on the pre-approved list, so that's fine. They've passed all our checks before. But I can tell you now, WorkSafe doesn't care, because if you actually go back and check the process to recertify, it's usually something really basic that just says, have you been prosecuted in the last year? It doesn't check at all what their systems are like, and it's not tailored to the specific works that they're doing. Sorry, what's your name? Rose. Rose is saying on my table, the fact that council has pre-filled the swims is just increasing the liability, because they haven't actually checked that the workers were competent or knew any of that. So big risk if there was prosecution for any kind of incident that happened.
Just talk about the controls that we've discussed. So we've spoken about things we can do, leadership capability, role clarity through our contractor engagement process, regular check-ins with the team member, all logical, reasonable things that can be done. You then mentioned the budding system. So instead of sending someone out into the field on their own, we're budding them up with someone else. Being in a council environment, financial pressures, capital works, rate capping environment, can you talk about reasonable judgment in saying, is it reasonably practical for us to buddy up and throw an additional resource to these jobs? And potentially, is there then an angle of me making a recruitment decision or a promotion opportunities to say, I actually can't afford to put Eva in that role because I can't afford to buddy up sort of scenario?
Yeah, well, that's good, Skip. I will answer this right, it's in my value. So the fourth element of reasonable practicability is resources. So if you're not able to resource the appropriate control, you mustn't do it. That's the law, okay? It's when it's a high risk. And the answer is, budding doesn't have to be 24 hours a day budding, but if you're going to go out to, so Eva might go to a large project where she understands what she's doing and it's uncomplicated for her. But if she's going to go to a small project that has high risk, then the engineer comes with it. So it's not an overuse of resource, but you're right, you may make recruitment decisions, which is what happens in law. We don't make any money out of graduates. So most law firms don't engage graduates after they come through. They wait till they're 2 or 3 years out when you can make money. I think it's cynical, but it's true. So you do have to make those decisions, but the fourth element of reasonable practicability is resources. And if you don't have the resources to create a safe environment, then you must stop what you're doing until you do. Okay? All right, can we read case study 2, please?
Eva, let's talk about what happened a few weeks back. You went to King Corners to look at some work that was meant to be undertaken, and Kurt was managing the work, was there. Can you recall the events that day?
Yeah, so it's been a little difficult working with Kurt. I rock up on site and it's not always what we've signed up for with the swim. So I've had to have a few discussions with him about safety and working with contractors, and being a woman, that can be sometimes a little bit of contention there.
So how does he treat you?
We've had some difficult discussions. He can be a little bit aggressive or doesn't take me very seriously. So that's been a bit of a challenge.
All right. Now, on the day in question that we're talking about, you were concerned about some traffic management and other safety issues. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened that day?
Yeah, so I've arrived on site, and knowing our traffic management plans in place, I realised that they weren't following those. So I've approached Kurt and his crew, tried to stop works, have a bit of a discussion and ensure that safety was in place before they started works again. And he's obviously under a bit of pressure for time, and there was a bit of swearing. And
well, no, to tell us what did happen. I mean, he laughed at you, didn't he?
He laughed at me, and yeah, I didn't really feel like the superintendent that day.
No. After that conversation, you felt embarrassed and it was difficult. What did you do to try and fix it?
I decided to go straight to Neil So I gave him a call because I just felt like he needed to be more aware of what was happening on site and that it wasn't safe, and that I wasn't able to get through to our contractor, Kurt. He wasn't taking me seriously.
And what was Neil's reaction?
Neil was a bit frustrated that I'd reached out to him again regarding my interactions with Kurt. Obviously, he's under a bit of pressure, but I didn't feel very good. I felt a bit humiliated after that conversation.
But he was reminding you of an agreement you reached, a narrative the two of you had about when you confronted someone who was pushing back, what to do. What did he say? Can you remember?
He essentially just told me that I just had to go back to him and tell him what to do, and that, you know, it was my site and I had to go own it.
And he wanted you to stop the work, didn't he?
He wanted me to stop the works, make sure that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah. Now, you realised that wasn't going to work, didn't you?
Yeah, not after the last discussion I'd had with Kurt.
And it's then you reached out to Colleen?
Yeah, I reached out to Colleen. I wasn't feeling very confident in being able to approach Kurt again after the last discussion we'd had. So I reached out to Colleen to see if she could help me out.
And she agreed to come over and give you a hand?
Yeah, she was able to get to site within 10 minutes. So
that's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Welcome again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Could you talk, Colleen, a little bit about the phone call you received from Eva?
Yes, so I got a phone call from Eva. She was clearly distressed from her voice. I could hear on the phone. She'd just spoken to the contractor and had quite a negative experience where they were quite abusive. He was quite abusive to her. And I think she'd spoken to Neil to kind of get some support, and that didn't really go down well either. There was... so she rang me.
A sort of pull your socks up type moment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was just get on with it and do it, which she did. But it ended up being quite, it wasn't a positive experience. It didn't go the way that was planned. And so she called me and I went down there as soon as I could because I knew that she was really distressed.
Neil, I want to talk to you about a situation where Eva rang you at a site and she was having problems with a contractor. You recall that day?
Oh, yeah, that was a really hard day. Look, I just got off a call with the CEO. I had the counsellors breathing down my neck. It was really, I was quite frustrated and I received that call from Eva.
I'll just talk to you a little bit about what was happening with the counsellors, because you have a hierarchy of capital works, for want of a better expression, that you complete in a year based on the urgency of them. And that's sort of the core activity, road maintenance, building maintenance, that type of thing, and new works. And two of the councillors were pressing a new project which is way outside of your budget, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. The demands are just getting, the gap's just widening and we can't meet these demands. We can't meet these budget constraints. It's just not feasible.
But you felt you pushed back okay and you felt that you were heard in the process?
Oh, I pushed back, yeah, for sure.
So when Eva rang you, she got a person who just pushed back against two councillors and a CEO. What was your state of mind at the time?
Well, I guess I was feeling it. Maybe I'm in the job, I'm used to doing it, and this is, you know, the type of father figure I try to be to her, to give her that oomph that she might need to get that bit tougher and a bit stronger. And I just thought that she had it in her to be able to go into these situations and deal with them.
Now, in this situation, you knew that Kurt from King Corners had been resisting doing traffic management, doing proper swims, and you'd said to just go back in, and you'd said, tell them to stop. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And she was a bit reluctant to do that, wasn't she?
Oh, I think there's always a bit of reluctancy, but I knew she could.
Yeah. Did you fall upon some of the discussions you'd had before in trying to lead her in that way?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I've pretty much been that way, consistent all the way.
What did you say to her?
I just said, you've got this. This is part of the job. You've picked civil engineer. It'll come naturally to you. You just tell them. Just tell them that that's what's going to happen. Lead it and show a bit of, guts out there.
G'day, Kurt.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Talk me through the project. You you started work on the project, you had the backhoe pulling up bits of old curb and channel, and then Eva, the engineer from council, came to see you. What did she want?
She wanted to chat to me about the swims,
Yeah.
and just had some concerns around the traffic management.
And the traffic management, you had a big truck park there. Could anyone get by?
Oh, it might have been a little bit hard to sort of swing around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you remember Eva attending the project, and she talked to you about the swims and traffic management. What's your recollection of what occurred?
Oh, she just had some queries around how the swims had been sort of done. I didn't think it was a big problem, like no one had been hurt or anything. They were able to get around the truck okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see what the big sort of fuss was.
Well, she was pushing you though, wasn't she? Because your swims was a bit different than the one that she'd worked with you.
Yeah, and, you know, my team on site, like they're, you know, like I said before, like English isn't their first language, so it's something so simple, a one-pager that I had would be much easier to understand compared to the 7 pages that Eva sort of worked on.
So how did you respond to Eva, mate?
You know, I just wanted to get in and get the stuff done, like with my fella, so I pretty much just told her to fuck off.
I've just finished a consult with Eva. I'm a little worried about how she's travelling. She explained that she'd been having some difficulties at work. It seems like some of the gentlemen on the work site aren't taking her nearly as seriously as they should. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon with young women in these sort of environments, but it's disappointing nonetheless. She's normally anxious, but now the not sleeping and I think the constant worry and stress has seen her not eat as well. She's not looking after herself as well as she could. No real physical problem. She's in good physical health generally, but she's not enjoying anything the way she used to. She hasn't got that lively, kind of ambitious spirit about her. She's quite flat, and I haven't seen her this flat and stay this flat, perhaps ever. She's always picked up otherwise. I think she's probably at the starting points of a depressive episode. I was a lot more concerned about pushing an antidepressant treatment, I think, at this point. I went from suggesting to being pretty firm about the need to do that. We discussed seafoam tablets. She's not really interested at this point in time, but I wanted to be coming in every couple of weeks, I think, at a minimum at this point, because those symptoms bother me a great deal.
I've been really surprised. Before, I just thought that Eva was, you know, just finding it a bit tough at work, but it all seems to have really become something more than that. The day that the man at work was nasty to her, or it was Mum's birthday, and we all got together as a family that night. And Eva, she's not a drinker, like I don't really normally see her drink, but we had some champagne there to celebrate. And somehow between that, the next minute she was crying and crying and crying. I've never seen her in that way. She's normally, you know, she keeps her feelings under control. She controls her response, but it was obvious that she's hit something that she's not coping with. Dad talked about having seen her boss Neil down at the bowls club. They obviously catch up a bit there, and they talked a bit about this guy who wasn't listening to what she was trying to say at work. And, you know, it sounds like the response has just been that, you know, it's enough, that she just shouldn't be putting up with that bullshit. That there's some kind of way she has to, I don't know, toughen up. But that's not what I was seeing. All I could see was this emotional response. And, yeah, it didn't seem like she had a clear, I don't know, it just didn't feel like she was coping.
As we already identified in our previous case studies, the poor support is really shining through pretty much from all levels there. Elements of bullying and harassment, the conflict and poor workplace relationships, obviously exacerbated by both of the above. And there's a real sense of lack of role clarity as well. I'm not sure who's supposed to be doing what.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so you've got to channel very easy on that.
All right, so I'll come over to Anthony on this table. Anthony, who's the dedicated speaker for this? I didn't write any notes. I'd like to go somewhere with all my comments. Okay, guys over here, what's the speaking over here on controls?
I've just got a message in. If you come back to me, I'll just go 2.5 minutes.
That's just such bullshit. It's a great try. So here we go, with the methods. And remember, my family are allowed to speak with your mouth. So here we go.
Thank you, apologies for that. So we spoke a lot about the job design, again, similar to touching on the first hand, but then we also talked about leadership and the way that the leadership from the hierarchy, whether it be the councillors and the CEO, having that impromptu conversation around projects that fit outside the scope, but then also Neil having to provide that leadership and maybe educating him to how to mitigate, have those conversations so that the next conversation he has is not in the same headspace he was originally. And I think that was roughly the movies.
No, that's okay, that's great. Okay, it was worth waiting.
Yeah,
Can I just say to you, just remember, on every psychological hazard, it's like a coin. There is the hazard on one side and the preventative part on the other side. So you can see how the preventative part's going to come into play very easily. So when she's feeling isolated, what do you do when something's feeling isolated? You provide them with a layer of support. When they lack clarity, you give them certainty. So I want people to remember, just because it's called a psychological hazard, it's also got the protective part on the other side, and I want you to think through that. Now, who can I wander down and ask questions of now? Anyone else got this? I'll come down to the bottom of the table again. I've done this for a bit. Down at this table, any other controls that you like? Yes, and who's the spokesperson? How do you know you take your chances? Who's going to do that? Hey, well, I'm right.
What we sort of spoke about, some of the controls were obviously the leadership was spoken about, but it also doesn't sound like to deal with conflict resolution or resilience. So some of those controls as well, how to deal with situations which should be obviously qualified.
Yeah. She is many more than this, isn't she? It's repetitive, okay? And she's a person we know has a low resilience to that type of contact. So let's go to Arthur and hear the truth of what we should be doing. Some great feedback there, but Arthur, it's over to you, mate.
I think all the hazards identified by most of the groups are pretty much spot on. We've focused on the leadership, capability, training, skills, both technical and soft skills. And I think just one key message I want to draw out, you can start to see the frequency and duration piece. That's what started to highlight a risk. So if you look at case study 1, going into part 2 of this, frequency is increasing, duration within this, so it's amplifying the risk associated with all of this. So looking at leadership, I love the fact that we look at Neil as well. So we're moving all the way up. It's not just sitting at either level or cut the lane. You're going, well, what's happening at Neil's? We need to address that issue up there, right through to CEO or wherever else it may need to head. I loved also the fact around prevention. A really big point here. If you look at all of these hazards and you've got your doc, they're actually protective factors if you flip them. So whenever we're identifying these hazards, the same what is the protective component to that, and what does that need to look like? It's probably more just key messages, I think. The key identification of the hazards, the risks being really strong in the controls, and you can see where it's sitting most of the time. Leadership, work design, culture. You build the other bits, but that's further down the chain. To get the top bits right, you find you've got less of the other requirements.
I think what study 2 shows though is the intervention is the protect. This isn't expensive, it's not an expensive process, is it? This is all very simple, cheap stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's... We saw the video, I talked a lot to lead with caring and compassion.
Yeah.
Ultimately, about caring for your people. You can see someone who's finding their role challenging, a client challenging, how is the supervisor or the more senior leader supporting them? And that is just about checking in. I hear this over and over. You know, I was just sharing the example here, and it's played out here. I hear it every other day. You know, the workload one is a good example. I've got too much on. And a response, like, hey, that's just how it is. You just got to toughen up.
that's not helpful. That's not leading with care and compassion. And it goes a long way, which is very cheap. You go, what do you need? How do I help you? And how do I support you? And how do we build that into the culture of how an organisation leads to that? And that doesn't require money. That requires a good mindset, humanistic approach to the way to support our people.
Can I just add to that? I know this is a sort of dark story in a way that if I'm about to walk across the street, it's a busy street, and I've got my daughter with me, and a truck comes around the corner, do I take the trouble to protect my daughter from being hurt? I do it without thinking, don't I? I mean, but when I've got a work colleague, I always sort of push them out and say, take a chance. And it is a hard issue. I think it's very easy to get stuck in the law, and get stuck in the studies and everything else. But do we care about the people we work with? I'm by nature an introvert and I don't like people very much, so no, I don't. It's a short answer. But have I become more deliberate and more practiced in it? Yes. Do I actually care in my heart? Yes. But does my brain get that? Not always. But I would never leave a conversation with somebody that's stressed and not say, well, think about it, if there's something I can do to help, let me know. And I wouldn't ever say, grow a spine. Okay? Because I'm just leaving the person isolated with the pain. Even if the person's underperforming, and they should be able to do it, how helpful is it saying, grow a spine? Okay? It's not. Tim, very quickly from you, mate. And we come coming up here, I don't understand. There you go.
Thanks, Andrew. I commented to the group that on the grow a spine motion. We all know that's important to do, and we've all had to get through things where we just have to put our head down and get on with it and be tough and get through it. Fine, that's what we all have to do in different parts of our life. And it's really important to be able to do that. But it's bloody useless being told to do it. It doesn't help anyone, it doesn't solve the problem. I read it, the table I was working with continued to highlight again and again issues around culture and leadership, trickle down from the top through the organisation, setting the tone, leading to this cascading set of problems that you can set the problem in front of. And that understanding what leadership really is a really important thing. One of the definitions of leadership that I've heard from a psychologist named Bob Hogan is that leadership is the ability to build and maintain a high-performing team that outperforms the competition, or they would outperform the problems that are in front of them. And everyone focuses on the building part, everyone focuses on the maintaining part. And the leader's job is to understand who their team is and then get problems out of their way so they can be amazing. And basic training around that seems so important in such a situation.
Thank you very much. Just an example, AFL coaches. They measure absolutely everything in the players, absolutely everything. What is the one thing they definitely measure now? Psychosocial pressures on the players, because they recognise to get a high-performing culture, people have to be well, they have to be enjoying themselves to perform at their highest level. So that's, the clarity of high-performance culture in sport recognises above all that 5 to 10% makes excellence is driven from people being healthy and happy and measuring it, engaging it and caring. Okay? So remember, the protective element for when work is heavy is to say, I'm in there with you. Turning up with them, being present. It's saying, it's only there for a week or two, I'm with you, let me know what you need. It's not saying don't do it. If I say injunctions to the library, they'll be excited by it. They know it's going to be huge work. But they know we all throw it together. It's an exciting time, okay? But the protective elements work. Nina, it's over to you.
I think we can all agree that there is big risk for both. With the workers' compensation, I think Neil made a big deal about how he was trying to increase Eva's skills. She doesn't have great skills in kind of conflict management. It's something he's been trying to work with her on. But remember, that's okay. The only defence for workers' compensation is reasonable management action. So with him trying to increase her skills, the manner in which he did that wasn't reasonable. He was pushing her to do something where she had already said, I don't feel safe doing this and it makes me quite distressed. But he didn't hear that, and in fact he gaslit her and said, you'll be fine, just keep doing it. We've all done it before. So definitely wouldn't meet that defence, and if she were to file a workers' compensation claim, she would win it slam dunk for sure. In terms of safety prosecution, I think we can all smell the reckless endangerment risks. If you've listened to our Fighter Workplace briefing, you've heard me say time and time again, it's not enough to do a little bit of something. If there is a serious risk there, and we know there is, they're working with heavy plant machinery, there's no traffic management in place, they have not stopped the works. The fact that Eva's gone and talked to Neil and he's not done anything about it is not enough to save council from that obligation. Unless more is done, you've been ignorant to the risks, and council is definitely getting charged with reckless endangerment if something happens.
And I might say Neil's not looking so flush either.
Yeah.
So Neil, you don't have insurance now? Log in, mate. There is strife. Eva, it's been a few weeks since we last chatted. How are you feeling now?
Not very good.
All right, can you share with us what happened on the day of the incident?
So like I said, when we last chatted, I contacted Colleen and she came to site. I wasn't up to it. I wasn't up to talking to Kurt again after the last discussions we'd had. So she came with me, and as she was telling him to stop works, the concrete fell and hit Kurt.
Okay, it fell off the edge of the truck and struck him in the head, is that right?
Yes.
Do you have any memory of what happened immediately after then?
Not very much. I just froze. I couldn't really act. I found myself on the ground, and Colleen was helping Kurt. But yeah, I don't know.
In the days that followed that, can you talk to us about how you felt and how it's impacted you?
I've just been crying and haven't been able to stop.
And are you able to sleep?
No, I just keep thinking about that I've let everyone down. I've let Neil down, and Colleen and Kurt, obviously, and Kurt's family. And
now your general practitioner has given you a certificate of capacity, but you won't hand into work. Why is that?
I just don't think I can do it.
Colleen, it's been a difficult last week, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Last time we spoke, you talked to me about going to the site to catch up with Eva because she was so distressed. Can you tell me what happened when you got to the site?
Yep. I got to the site and I found Eva in her car. She was clearly very upset, shaking. I'd never seen her like that before. She was severely stressed. So I managed to get her out of the car and we walked over to Kurt. So I wanted to sort of shut everything down as advised by Neil. And next thing I know, there's this big concrete slab that's just come out of nowhere and just hit Kurt. He's landed on the ground. There's blood everywhere. I straight away go in to try and give him some first aid. We call an ambulance, and ambulance comes. And then I turn around and Eva's just curled up in a ball on the side of the pavement, like she's
just terrible,
totally shut down.
Now she, when you got her together a bit, she was determined to support Kurt, wasn't she? And she wanted to go to the hospital.
She really was very determined. Yeah. So we ended up following to the hospital. So we were in the room with, in the ED with Kurt, and she was there, but she wasn't. Like she was totally shut down and sort of rocking, very, very distressed.
And you eventually, when Kurt went in and the ambulance officer eventually got him in, you took her home to her parents. Have you had any success in speaking to her since?
Unfortunately, she's just not taking calls. It's really difficult to, she doesn't want to speak to anybody. I've spoken to her parents. They feel that she's really taking she's taking ownership for this. She's feeling responsible for all of the, for Kurt. And yeah, she's totally not in a good way.
Welcome, Neil. I know this is not an easy time. We're talking shortly after an incident with Kurt being injured and where you're aware that Eva's not coming back to work. What's your reflection on this?
I feel absolutely terrible about this whole scenario. I really feel for Eva. I feel like I've really let her down. I've tried counselling and it's not done anything for me. I can't shake this off. I've just let her down. I feel terrible.
G'day, Kurt.
Andrew.
Tough time since we last spoke. Can you tell us about the incident where you were struck by a concrete block?
Oh, look, mate, I don't remember too much. It's been a bit of a struggle. I can't recall the event at all. I just woke up in the ICU and just didn't know where I was and what was going on.
And it's affected your left side of your body?
Yeah, I can't really move that well. Like, they think I'll never work again.
Yeah. How's it impacted your family?
Well, it's really hard. Like, I've relied on my wife a lot, and she's not able to do the roles that she would usually do. It's affected us financially as well. Got a mortgage, and the ripple effect is just enormous.
Oh, look, it's a terrible situation. I think it's just tragic. This poor young woman. She's recently been hospitalised. The workplace incident she described sounds absolutely shocking, awful. I can't believe a workplace would let a situation like this unfold as it has. This poor young woman. She's not able to see a sense of future. She's talking about how useless she is, what a failure she is, how she's incompetent at life. I can't believe the young woman I saw just some months ago has been so impacted and is so traumatised and disturbed. I recommend she's on an antidepressant. I think she should be on a mood stabiliser. I've got her on an antipsychotic at night to help her sleep. But she'll never work again. I mean, she's broken. She's been ruined by this. I'm just horrified. I've got no idea what the future holds for her, but it's extremely grim.
It kind of feels now like I've lost the sister that I knew. I don't know, in a family, you've kind of got the characters that you play, and she was always the smart one. She was the best at school. She got ducks. She got into engineering. She won the prizes. That was her. And look, she may have always been a bit straight, but kind of with other people like her, she had friends. She got on well, and kind of, I think I've always said she enjoyed that achievement. So whether it was at university or at work, she wanted to do well. And now it's not her. I mean, since she's come out of the hospital, she just stays in a room. She's crying. She's reacting to things. And actually, it doesn't just feel like I've lost a sister in this process. My parents didn't expect this. They thought we were, grown up and leaving. And now they've got someone who, I don't know, it doesn't look like she's going to work again. It's now impacting on all of us. I'm not really sure how to bring my sister back.
Got to start addressing all of those things from leadership level down and start changing that culture to have any hope of giving her a meaningful existence in the future, and changing that culture. And as the previous table said, the job should never have gone ahead, and you've missed your opportunity there to prevent all of this from happening.
Can I say part of the reason of doing the case study was to demonstrate something that seemed innocuous at the time. An engineer is going to a site with a very small business. Hardly anybody would think that's a risk today. Does that make sense? And that's why we did it. But one of the things that Emma's right about, and I think Emma and I have spoken about many times, is by the time safety actually does get involved, the damage has been done. And it's terrible, isn't it? Because all your skills are in the prevention and intervention space. Nobody can fix destruction. All we can do is try and fix the person, and I agree, to try and bring some organisational justice in is a fantastic way of starting healing. But how easy was it to intervene early? How easy was it to build the skills that were necessary to reflect? For Neil to go, I might have it wrong about this woman. I mightn't have it right. To go, why am I putting someone in the highest risk? Maybe I spoke to my safety team and they went out and said, are you serious? These people know nothing. You should be supervising everything they do. You should be giving a non-conformance now. But nobody spoke to safety. Nobody spoke to safety until someone nearly died. Not great, okay? Can I invite someone from this team over here to make their comments? There you go, boss.
Thank you. Oh, look, it's almost following on from what Emma just said. It's you know, we've all identified the hazards, but it's all around now looking at the leadership and leading by example and fixing the way that work's allocated and buddying up and supervising and ensuring that people are set up for success as opposed to failure. So it's really in line with what Emma said and underpinned by all procedures and processes. You know, have we armed our people on how to deal with difficult customers and all that sort of stuff. And you know, pretty much Emma helped me out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just say, we're dealing with governance next time. What would be the governance process? Just think about assessment of risk of engineers going on the site as a governance thing. Doesn't this inform you straight away? We need to actually know what the level of risk are for our people going out there, and we need to have some systems in place. That's a governance process. That's stepping back from a known hazard that impacts a whole lot of people and going, we need to be more systematic about this. We need to be able to rate it. We need to know what we're doing. If you can't do that, you're just doing it on an ad hoc basis. And what happens when you do things ad hoc? People die. It's pretty simple. So, look, what we're going to do now, I hope Arthur hasn't deserted me. There's Arthur. I'm going to get Arthur and Nina to come up the front, okay? Because I want them to spend a little bit more time just reflecting on the 3 case studies that we've had. Arthur particularly talking about times of intervention, what the intervention could be along each pathway, and what that looks like, what an organisation could do. And Nina probably reflecting a little bit on where we are now and who's going to jail, okay? But what I can say is the fact that it's impacted Neil so bad personally is a sentencing issue, not a prosecution issue. In other words, the judge, when they come to sentence Neil as an officer and as an individual who is a wrongdoer, it won't stop the charge, but it may mitigate it slightly by the damage that's been done to him, sense of contrition and remorse. Does that make sense? The fact that someone's been injured doesn't get in the road of a charge. It just affects their ultimate sentence. So maybe if I can not give away all Nina's details, and I'll hand you over to Arthur just to give us a thorough breakdown after a reflection on what we do. Okay?
Thanks for this, Andrew. Quite horrific to get to that third stage, and we can see how important prevention is and the role that plays. And if you recall, and it's in your documents, which is this visual here, it's about how do we move back up, and this is now getting you to think, going back into your workplaces, conducting a comprehensive psychosocial risk assessment. You've got the hazards that are all listed there. I circled pretty much every single one when I think of these case studies. When I think of this case study, you've got a cultural issue, possible harassment, bullying, or inappropriate workplace behaviours. You've got things around civility or incivility playing out, and microaggression, micro behaviours, sometimes not overly overt, and they're often a lot trickier and more complex to deal with than the more overt kind of situations. You've got work environment, equipment, hazardous components associated with that, and all justice, which you spoke to. And then you've got the team group factors around leadership, support, supervision missing, and then you go into the job design,
which is roles, expectations, clarity, and people being able to do their roles. But we've also got the personal factors. And when thinking about a assessment of psychosocial hazards, it's considering them. And we saw it here with Eva. She's got some of her own personal challenges that come into the workplace, and that's every single person in various forms. So the first step would be to conduct that assessment. That gives you a really good baseline to understand, which then allows you to move, and I think Andrew was talking to this, going into specific risk profiles of various roles. We can start to see things even like onboarding, how are people inducted and onboarded, what's expected of a role like Eva's from the moment she starts. What kind of technical training is needed there, what kind of coaching, mentoring, leadership support is needed, and the expectations of leaders around that. But ultimately, the first step in, through all of this, where possible, you can do it in a range of ways, is to conduct a comprehensive assessment. And you would have seen in the video earlier, spoke to if you don't have the opportunity for a survey of some sort, you've got lots of other data points you can leverage off. Even your engagement surveys will give you some data. It's not a psychosocial risk assessment, but it does give you some insights as to what's going on. Equally, absenteeism, people leaving the organisation, performance information, incident reporting will give you really good insights, which then allows you to move into, that's why I like sharing the 7 workplace focus areas, that's the how bit. So that's going to allow us to move again into that preventative space to go, what are the controls we need to put in under each of these buckets of the 7 workplace focus areas. And it was repetitive. I mean, if we hear it between case study 1 and case study 2, we kept talking to the same things. Case study 2 to 3, we kept talking to the same things, and at case study 3, we're saying we should have implemented what we were talking about in case study 1 and case study 2. And there were a handful of key things we needed to look at. Leadership, culture, supervision, support, early intervention. We all aligned with that, setting up the right culture. Then we moved into capability training, what Eva needed in her role, and possibly Neil and others to be able to support Eva in the role as well. But we're all pretty clear on what that looks like. And I often say we already know what we need to be doing. It's how do we start to shift it upstream and start taking action.
Great. All right, Arthur, just one thing I would say is, just can you speak briefly on the safety culture of being able to raise your hand? Because that's the issue here is either couldn't raise your hand and say, it's not working for me.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it when we talk about raising your hand, it's that concept of psychological safety, coined by Amy Edmondson. It's not psychological health and safety, they often get confused. Psychosocial safety, it's one factor within broader psychological health and safety. So psychological safety is about feeling safe to put your hand up without fear of retribution or consequence. And immediately Neil shut that down. You could see that with the response. You either need to toughen up, whatever the language was used. That immediately shifts culture. That creates a culture of, I will no longer put my hand up because it doesn't feel safe, even though Eva was still trying to make some attempts by continuing to go back to Neil, because Pauline even asked, why did she come to me? And she was trying to influence change in that place to get Neil to understand that actually this isn't right. But Neil wasn't responding to that. So that psychological safety is shifting that culture, and that is one that needs to be embedded in leadership. The opportunity to share mistakes. Often try and flip things like zero tolerance. As much as we want zero tolerance of harm, sometimes it can stop people from reporting because it's going to impact on data and metrics. So how do you create a culture where people do talk about the things that haven't worked well? What have been all the stuff-ups in the last week? Being able to create that type of environment allows for people to come forward. And that's something that was lacking there that leadership would need to invest in. Thanks.
One thing I'd just like to say is I'm not against general practitioners. I don't think that there's any general practitioners. They have about 7 to 8 minutes of time to tell you what's wrong with you, and they tell you what you told them is wrong. So we need to not be critical of them. They're supporters and advocates. What we do need to know is what's wrong with people or how they're different, and we need to act upon reliable information. And GPs don't have that opportunity to create that on most occasions. So if we are worried about Eva, there is no problem with saying to Eva, look, it's not working with us. How do we help you? Can we get some assessments so we understand the impact this job's having on you? Can we talk to the other members of the group and find out how we can do that better? That's why I brought Tim along today. Skip asked the question to me, could this go to recruit? Could you look at people based on it? So we find out that this person does have some neurodiversity. Huge opportunity for the group because of her skills and intellect. But utilised the wrong way, she's no longer a scalpel, she becomes a hammer. So we do need to know people. Now, sometimes that's in psychometric testing, but we don't exclude someone because they might have some autism if that autism actually happens to be an incredible benefit to the business, and often is. So I just want you to remember, we're not trying to find the same people for the same role. What we're trying to do is find out how people are different and actually maximise their input for the business and keep them happy. And that's reflection. That's reflection and understanding. But don't expect the GP to pick up the person's neurally developed. Don't expect that to happen. They're just dealing with a person who's stressed, okay? Okay, Nina, over to you.
So I think we're all in agreement that a lot of people are going to be charged, but let's just go through the parties. Hands up if you think King Corners is going to be charged with something. Yeah, okay. What about what about council? Do you reckon they'll be charged? Yep. So they'll both definitely be charged with a breach of primary duties and also reckless endangerment. Clearly a high risk situation where there was a risk of serious injury which eventuated. You know, traffic management is one of WorkSafe's main prosecution areas, same with heavy plant, and they were aware that King Corners wasn't operating safely and continued the works anyway, so they were both definitely going down. Does anyone think that Eva will get charged? No. Yeah, see, I think this was a really interesting one, and I had a debate with Andrew about it because she was clearly aware that King Corners wasn't doing the right thing, and she tried to raise it with them. They didn't listen to her. So normally you'd say, well, ignorant to the risk because nothing's done. But what's really interesting is Eva was a junior employee in this situation. She didn't have the skills and she didn't have the power to actually affect the change. That is the difference between her and Neil. Even though Neil is one step away from it, he wasn't present. He wasn't seeing what King Corners was doing. But through Eva's knowledge and Eva telling him, he was well aware that they weren't doing the right thing and knew what could be done to stop it. But he didn't intervene, and instead he pushed it on to Eva because she didn't have that same level of responsibility. There is no way that WorkSafe would charge her. Neil, however, definitely getting charged under reckless endangerment and also Section 144. He's an officer. His actions definitely contributed to the contravention. Exactly the same thing to Kurt, even though he was the one injured. They would definitely charge him as well.
Okay.
That's everyone, right?
Yeah, that's. I think you've got everyone you could possibly get there, actually. Except a dog was walking past who turned up at one of mine. Terry probably got prosecuted for just sticking his fang in. I guess what you understand is Neil's on the edge of jail. That's why I wanted operational people to come along. Neil is on the verge of jail. He'll probably end up with a suspended sentence. In 3 years' time, he'll go to jail because that's the way sentencing's going. That's why I want officers and executive members to come along so they understand. Yes, Skip?
Can you talk about that officer element? Because there's a perception in local government that officers or those in the sites are the CEO and general managers or directors, as they are called, whereas the manager in Neil is the next rung down.
No, he's ELT. So he is ELT, so he's an executive manager. Beneath that is not an officer. So it has to be someone who has control or substantial control. So CFO in traditional business or person running money, and all the executive level are deemed to be officers for the purpose of this. So are councillors, officers, but they're not employees. So there is a risk of officer liability that sits around the directions and the pressure that's being placed on Neil, but it's low level.
And lastly, was there anything that you saw in this study around the organisational failings that makes you think the CEO could be in scope?
I think the CEO is definitely in scope. Okay, CEO's in scope, and that's why we played the Neil part played out. I don't think the CEO would be prosecuted in 2025. I think we're seeing a range of prosecutions where the due diligence element is being focused on, and where CEOs and other officers who aren't directly in the line are being charged. So in, I reckon, about 2 years' time, we'll see CEOs charged.
And Andrew, the new changes to the psych regs as well, given the reporting requirements and stuff, will mean that the CEO will have that knowledge, so that it will bring them into more liability.
All right, now what I want to do now is thank you both very much. Just before we have our break, I thought we'd show you what it looks like on television. All right?
Welcome to the 6 o'clock news, here first on 7. I'm Kalani Thomas, bringing you the breaking news. Today at 2 p.m, a near fatal workplace incident occurred, with 2 people airlifted to the hospital. The incident arose at Morphett Shire Council at the roadworks, with 1 man nearly decapitated by the concrete falling from the back of a backhoe bucket. Over to Freya Ferguson Douglas at the scene.
Thanks, Kalani. Devastating scenes on site today. Only an hour ago, a helicopter transported a white male with serious head injuries to Canning General Hospital ICU, where we understand he's undergoing an emergency craniotomy to release the pressure from his brain. Another woman has also been hospitalised in relation to the incident. I'm here with Sergeant Caruso from the Victoria Police, who's in charge of the scene today. Sergeant Caruso, can you give us any updates on the situation?
Freya, we are still investigating. Information is coming in sporadically, but we do know there's a man, 46 years old, was working and at the construction site, and a concrete channel had fallen from the backhoe bucket and hit him in the head, severing his skull and exposing a temporal lobe, and he is being, as you said, airlifted to the hospital. There was a woman nearby who saw the incident who is also receiving treatment as well.
Has WorkSafe attended the scene?
WorkSafe has attended the scene. They are making inquiries with the Morphett Council, and no doubt charges will be laid under the safety law.
Thank you, Sergeant.
So, Inspector, looking at these reports, their victim impact statement, the police report, and your statement. So let me get this right. The contractor was incompetent in safety and the council knew, including the key officer, and yet they didn't supervise or control the work.
That's right, David. Worse still, a similar incident happened before this one, although there was no dropping of the concrete. And the response of the officers was just to tell them what to do, not to actually stop the work.
Really? So they knew the risk was on them. They knew this type of risk and they did nothing.
No, they thought the contractor was responsible.
How could they? They had no safety skills. They were not complying with the basic safety, and Eva had identified the key risks. And they refused to do as she said. Both the council and Neil can't walk away from reckless endangerment. And the obvious impacts of the psychological hazards on Eva were known, not acted upon. 2 charges, I think.
Agreed. My thoughts also, boss.
Eva and Morphett Council, they're not unusual things. Nina and I see them every day. But the issues that you've just seen spoken about are these. The reputational risk is just huge. We usually involve a communications business to help us with it to try and prevent the damage being done. we spend a lot of time managing how we actually deal with WorkSafe when the matter arises to reduce the likelihood of prosecution or to mitigate the effect. But you've now seen Arthur, you've seen Tim, you've seen Matt, you've seen the family, and you understand that when someone is injured at work, particularly in a psychological hazard, there's a whole lot of other people who form part of the frame. There's a whole lot of other causes behind why it occurs, but the impact upon the person, the family and other workers is incredibly profound.
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'm going to offend nearly everybody in the room when I answer this question. I come from a person who defends employers, so the first person I want to speak to anybody is not the occupational health and safety person. Why? Because they actually know where the bodies are buried. Okay? So there should be a designated person in your organisation or a designated group of people, based on absenteeism and things, that you notify in relation to an incident which is a serious incident, because a determination has to be made as to how it will be dealt with. If there is a risk at all of prosecution, then this is what you do. You ring that person rings the lawyer and gets a cloak of legal professional privilege immediately, who appoints an expert from outside to investigate. The internal investigation, which is part of your system, so must be done, is factual, not causative. Does that make sense? So-and-so was struck by this and suffered an injury. You don't know the nature of the injury, so don't use words like the gloving. Please don't use forklift or mobile plant, because WorkSafe have triggering elements in a triage area that designate whether someone attends straight away. So it goes to person one, tells the lawyer you've got to tell WorkSafe as soon as reasonably practical. At that stage, that person should speak to their competent safety person to describe what the oral notification will be, and to ensure that the investigation is a limited investigation that's factual, not causative, and the external expert should have it. That should all happen in the first 10 minutes. Okay? Within half an hour, all those people who could be affected immediately by it are spoken to and given an opportunity to receive help. Please, in relation to serious physical injury, use only trauma-based counselling. Do not use general counsellors who will actually damage people more by asking them to revisit the event and describe it. So have clarity over what the intervention will be. This is me looking after you. Remove them from site to a place where they are together collectively. One of the best healing agents is for those who've been harmed to be close to each other, and to provide them with the resources and support of the organisation, and to ensure that they get home safely and there's someone there for them. Okay? WorkSafe have 2 days normally for serious investigation on site. If they don't get hold of people on the first day, because they've gone home and they're being protected and looked after, they miss out on about 80% of the real evidence they're going to rely on, because what do people say on the day of an incident? It was completely my fault. I knew this was going to happen. It's happened so often before. I've seen emails about it. They disclose the whole evidentiary pathway. So I would say by 2 hours we've got everybody safe. We've got people getting the help they need to get. We've started to look at what is the communication across the business, because it's important to let people know. Can I just say, no one's been prosecuted for a safety alert, just in case you're wondering. So within the end of the day, I would expect a safety alert to go out across the organisation and say, this is just a reminder when we're dealing with mobile plant. These are the 4 rules that we deal with every time. I want you to remember that. We had a person who suffered an injury today, and I never want to see it happen again. Why wouldn't you do it? Okay? In the first 2 hours, you've spoken to family, you provide them with support, you've got them to the hospital, you've made sure they've got accommodation, you make sure that they have somebody designated inside the organisation who has a generous heart and is available for them to organise their life around the support for that person. So does that look like day one? Does that sort of make sense? When the WorkSafe inspector comes, the safety person does not go around with the inspector. The operational person who can't answer any questions goes around with the safety inspector and says, yeah, no, that's terrible, let me find out about it. You want these documents? I don't know where they are. I'll find out about them. But get them to build the relationship, because it's them who can tell us within 2 to 3 weeks whether there's a likelihood of prosecution, but we have a chance to filter what is the evidence that gets to the regulator in that time. If the supervisor and the safety person speak directly in the first 12 to 14 hours of WorkSafe, it is likely they will disclose everything. Not because they're bad people, but the exact reverse. They'll say, this is, yeah, I know we've been trying to fix this for ages, it just drives me crazy. Yeah, we knew this was going to happen for the following reasons. Yeah, look, the forklift goes there all the time, everyone's always around it. That's off the jail time. Does that make sense? So I can send you around and I'll try and dig it out from the book I wrote on it. What are the 18 steps you take in the first hour, 2 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours? But the answer is we're not allowed to get in the road to WorkSafe, but we don't have to shovel information into this. Okay? Is that okay, Skip, or am I gone too far off the reservation?
No, perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions that anyone wants? We're here afterwards and we can talk for a little bit just if you want to chat individually. But I thought we'd show you what we're going to do next time, and I just think we've kept the best actor till last, I've got to say. This is Flo, the Chief People Officer, looking at risk inside the organisation. This is what we're going to do next time, is we're going to use 3 scenarios that look at organisational risk and governance and how you manage it, because we've done it on the individual level. How do we actually build a plan to make our WorkSafe safe? So,
Flo, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew.
And congratulations on your appointment. It's been 6 months now. You've been the Chief People Officer for the Council.
It's been a ride.
And you've got underneath you injury management, people and culture, and also safety, that's right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it's a big group of people, isn't it?
It is, but it's also a great group of people. We have the ability to touch many points of the business and make sure we provide the best service possible.
Can I ask your reflections? You've come in after the event where Kurt was seriously injured and Eva was dramatically impacted, but other people have been as well. Can you tell me in the engineering department what has been the impact of this incident?
This has been catastrophic for the whole council. The engineering department themselves, there's been so many people that have been impacted. The ripple effect has been huge. So we've had to put some things in place to deal with in the moment. We've had to make sure that everyone's fully aware of what's required of them. We've had to look at works and get some support from other councils to assist us to still meet some deadlines, but to really see how we can best support them in that area because they were impacted the most.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's a number of counselling that you can get, but if you don't get trauma counselling for people who are the subject of trauma, you actually damage them further. It's terrible, isn't it?
Correct.
Tell me what's happened with Neil, because that wasn't what I was expecting from meeting Neil.
So from Neil's perspective, he's taken it very personally. He is a great leader, knows what needs to be done to get the jobs done and what's required. But from knowing Eva personally, he felt more of a father figure, so he's taken it more personally as well. And from that perspective, I don't know if we actually gave him all the right tools he needed to be able to provide that level of service.
And he's struggling to come back to work, isn't he?
He is, very much so. And we can understand why. So we're putting a lot of things in place to support him, and not just him, his family.
Yeah. Can I take you a little bit more broadly now? When we're talking about psychological hazards, and that's what we started off talking about today, what's your experience now? You've had a chance to get your feet under the desk, and you look at the profile, and you look at the data out there. You know when people leave their exit interviews, you've looked at their leave balances, you've looked at absentee, you've looked at all those general factors. What are your impressions? Where are your real hotspots at the moment in relation to psychological hazards?
So for me, the things that I've identified is more the fact that people, our culture is our underlining item that we really need to focus on. Now, people go, oh, culture. It's a buzzword.
Yeah.
But if people don't feel that they're valued or being looked after, it affects them. So we need to make sure that we're creating that supportive environment that they can thrive in.
So if I can use examples, one of the things that's concerning me post-COVID is there has been the public have changed who they were. They weren't, prior to COVID, there was a level of, you're putting a ticket on my car, mate. Could you give me 5 minutes? It's changed, hasn't it?
Oh yes, people have become very aggressive since COVID. Their level of expectation and their level of communication has become very aggressive. So we are concentrating more on the areas that people are working with the public. Our customer service, our parking enforcement officers, many different areas that deal with the public, even our child centres, etc. People just don't seem to have a level of tolerance or good communication.
And I think from our discussions prior to you coming on today, there's also an emergent area of risk that's really quite alarming, isn't it? You're just starting to see the tide coming in, but it's scary, isn't it? Can
Absolutely.
you talk more about that?
From our perspective, it's all these legislations that are coming in that we need to make sure we're going to be compliant. But I feel that we've actually got a lot of work that we need to get the basics right first before we can then start the building blocks. And we need everyone to understand this is not just an HR or people and cultures areas or responsibilities. We need to make sure that everyone's fully aware that they play their part and they are all responsible for the psychosocial.
And I think this is where we use the difference between responsibility and accountability, don't we? So, for instance, I think from our discussion, you realise that safety prior to you coming in were the people who were managing and monitoring but had no capacity to do it because they weren't connected to operations at the early stage. So safety were getting it after someone was injured.
Correct.
Whereas HR now under your edges, they're taking greater control over the leadership design ones, aren't they?
Absolutely. So yes, we're making sure that everyone plays a part in this and engages together. So we work at it from a holistic point of view. So the HR business partners, the safety team, and the operational leaders, we need them. They're the ones that really need to help us with this.
And I love your construct that, OHS are over here dealing with the trauma-based stuff, people and culture dealing with leadership. They're responsible, but accountable are the organisational players within the team. And you've
Correct.
poured enormous resources into leadership development, haven't you?
We have, because that's the important part. If leaders don't know what they don't know. And very often we actually promote our leaders because they have the skill base on the actual tasks that they do. So Neil, for instance, he's an engineer. But did we actually teach him how to be a leader?
No. And Neil's reflections, I think, are that he thought he was doing a great job as a leader because he'd take the flak for everyone, he'd back everybody.
Correct.
But actually he had a bit of a tin ear. He couldn't hear what was needed.
Correct. There's a big difference.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I was just wondering if I could reach out to the city of Greater Dandenong to be the next set of actors. Could we get those guys? Thanks, Anthony. That's good. Thanks, Kevin. So, look, you can see why I left that to last because it raises the very questions we're talking about. What we do know is most constructs leave safety in charge of psychological hazards, and they can't be that person. They aren't the learning and development leadership developers in the organisation. That's people and culture. That's HR. But the people who are really responsible, the ones who go to jail, they're operational. So what I want us to try and do next time, and I'll come around and see you like I did last time, is to try and fill the story so we get it right, okay? The 3 stories, so we get operational people to understand where their risk arises after 1 December, where the positive duty exists. Let's build some case studies which says to operational people, okay, I had my levers there, I didn't do it. Why didn't I do it? What is the general risk that sits all around the organisation? Because I think what came from Flow is this. We always knew that people who are publicly facing are at risk. They're at more risk now than they've ever been because of the cultural change that's arisen since COVID. And that's just the truth. But we also understand that there is a cohort of people coming through in the younger groups who are much more vulnerable, that are being much more damaged by change, much more easily hurt. Doesn't make them weak. That's if you looked at the EML white paper, which is a fantastic study. What that showed is in that 25-year-old cohort, 47% identified themselves as having psychological illness or harm that prevented them from carrying out their work. That's huge, isn't it? So we now also need that part of our method of growing a safe culture is knowing our people and building structures around the people we have, not doing one size fits all. So I'll be doing lots of work with Tim and Arthur building this up for next time. But if we can really focus on getting senior operational people on, the go-to-jail people, like if you want, I'll get a t-shirt that has a toothbrush and bars on it for them, we'll give it to each one of them. Whatever you want to do, we'll do it. But I want them to understand you can educate and you can influence, but you can't be them. Okay? And if I ask you individually what your frustration would be, it is their lack of ownership around this issue and unwillingness to understand that people are different. And that leadership is not something you're born with, it's something deliberate. Leadership requires skills, it requires practice, it requires reflection. It's not something you just have, it's something you've got to make sure when you look in the mirror each day that you're doing it. So I'll send you out the dates so that you can hold it in the next week or two. You'll get the movie. The movie of today, so you might even see yourself on it. But the idea of it is, and the structure will be, it's something you can take as a tool to teach people. You're free to use it, okay? Because I think it's the best way we can do stuff is build stuff that goes out as a tool. But I will come and visit, and I do need your help in building the scenarios for next time so they resonate with you. They're the issues you're dealing with, so that I capture it right, so that when you do bring in your operational person, they go, oh, I recognise that. Oh, yeah, we do that. And just like always, the first one will seem benign, and they'll go, see, I'm okay, I'm not in trouble. And the second one, suddenly they'll see the judge sitting there looking at them, and the third one, they'll be there let out by the police, okay? So we'll hopefully get it across the line. But today, can I just once again thank my team who've been fantastic, thank the experts, Arthur, Kim, Matt. Now you can run, but there's still more food. You could probably get some more of that. All right.